Your muscles are sending messages to your brain right now, and most people never build enough to hear them. 2 pounds of muscle can change how your mind ages. Tonight, you'll learn exactly why.
Every time you lift something heavier than you're used to, your muscles do something almost no one tells you about. They send a message straight to your brain. And that message might be the difference between a sharp mind at 90 and a foggy one. There's a man I know, 73, who used to think exercise was for the young. He'd sit on the porch and watch his grandson lift weights in the garage and shake his head. "That's not for people like me anymore," he'd say. Then his memory started slipping. Small things first. A name he'd know a moment later. A reason he'd walked into a room. His doctor mentioned, almost in passing, that strength training might help more than crossword puzzles ever could. He didn't believe it, but he was scared enough to try. The first time he picked up a dumbbell in his garage, he felt almost foolish. 5 pounds. His grandson could curl 5 pounds 100 times without breaking a sweat. But his shoulders shook by the 8th repetition, and he had to sit it down, embarrassed, glancing toward the door to make sure no one had seen. He kept going anyway. Twice a week, alone in that garage, 5 pounds became 8, 8 became 10. He didn't tell anyone at first. Not his wife, not his grandson, not even his doctor at the next appointment. It felt too small to mention, too private, almost like admitting he was scared enough of losing his mind to try something this simple. 12 weeks later, holding dumbbells that felt embarrassingly light at first, something had changed. Not just in his arms, in his mind. The fog had lifted, just slightly, enough to notice, enough that his wife asked him what had changed, and he had to admit, a little sheepishly, that it was the garage, the dumbbells, the thing he'd sworn wasn't for people like him anymore. Here is the mechanism almost nobody explains simply. When your muscles contract under load, especially resistance training, they release a class of proteins called myokines. Think of myokines as chemical messengers dispatched from muscle tissue directly into your bloodstream. One of the most studied is called irisin. Research has linked irisin to increased levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports the growth and survival of neurons, particularly in the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory. In other words, your muscles are not separate from your brain. They are in constant chemical conversation with it. Build muscle, and you are quite literally sending signals that support neuron health, mood regulation, and memory. This is why strength training in later life correlates with sharper cognition, not as a coincidence, but as biology, muscle speaking to mind, one contraction at a time. In other words, Your muscles are not separate from your brain. They are in constant chemical conversation with it. Build muscle, and you are quite literally sending signals that support neuron health, mood regulation, and memory. This is why strength training in later life correlates with sharper cognition, not as a coincidence, but as biology, muscle speaking to mind, one contraction at a time. What makes this especially striking is the direction of the relationship. For most of the 20th century, we assumed the brain simply commanded the muscles. A one-way conversation, top-down, master to servant. Myokine research flips that entirely. The muscles talk back. They send their own signals upward, shaping the very organ that commands them. It's a feedback loop, not a hierarchy, and it means the body you build is, in a very real biochemical sense, building the mind you keep. This matters enormously as we age, because muscle mass naturally declines after 50 if it isn't actively maintained, a process called sarcopenia. Most people think of that decline purely in terms of physical strength, the ability to carry groceries or climb stairs. But if muscle is a source of these brain protective signals, then losing muscle silently means losing part of the chemical support your brain has relied on for decades without anyone ever explaining the connection. You don't need a gym membership or heavy weights. 2 pounds of new lean muscle, achievable in 12 to 16 weeks for most adults over 60, is enough to meaningfully increase myokine signaling. Twice a week, resistance work. Body weight squats holding a chair for balance. Wall push-ups, resistance bands, or light dumbbells. Focus on the major muscle groups: legs, back, chest. Progressive and consistent beats intense and occasional. Your muscles don't need to be impressive. They need to be used. Start smaller than feels necessary. The man in this story began with 5 pounds and felt foolish. That feeling passes within 2 or 3 sessions, and what replaces it is something closer to quiet pride, the sense of doing something for yourself that nobody has to see or applaud for it to count. Track your sessions simply, a check mark on a calendar, nothing elaborate. The goal over 16 weeks isn't a transformation you notice in a mirror. It's 2 pounds. Small, achievable, and as it turns out, more than enough to start a conversation your brain has been waiting to have. But here's the deeper truth hiding inside: the biology. For years, we've separated the body from the mind, treated them like 2 different departments. Muscle over here, memory over there. Biology doesn't see it that way. Every rep, every small act of strength is a form of communication. Your body is not simply carrying your mind around like cargo. It is speaking to it constantly in a language written in protein and signal. Think about what it took for that man to pick up a 5-pound dumbbell in private, in a garage at 73, after a lifetime of believing that kind of effort belonged to someone younger. It wasn't really about the weight. It was about permission. Permission to still be someone who tries, who builds, who takes his own decline seriously enough to do something uncomfortable about it. There is something almost sacred in that caring for your body, even in small, humble ways. A resistance band, a chair, a Tuesday afternoon in a garage nobody's watching, is a direct act of caring for your mind. The two were never separate. We just forgot to listen. He didn't need a new memory. He needed a reason to believe his body still had something to say, and the willingness to lift something heavy enough to hear it. Building even small amounts of muscle triggers myokines, chemical messengers that support brain health, memory, and mood. The relationship runs both ways. Your brain doesn't just command your muscles talk back. 2 pounds of lean muscle, built gradually through simple resistance work twice a week, is enough to start that conversation between body and brain.
This episode reflects personal perspective and general wellness information, not medical advice. Please consult your doctor before beginning a new exercise program, especially if you have joint, cardiovascular, or other health conditions. Send this to someone who thinks strength training isn't for them anymore. Follow @Art of Aging podcast for the next story.